So I'm going to go over walls today, and we're going to talk about the definition of walls and how to create wall assemblies. I'm going to talk about grid lines today a little bit too. So I'm going to show you how to create grid lines, and I'm going to hopefully I think that will get us a little bit of head for Wednesday, which is my intent because next week is design week. Has anybody heard? Well, those of you that have been in my classes before today know. But next week is design week. Has anybody heard of design week? No? Okay. So, have you heard of design week? No. Okay. So my other evening classes, so my intro class, which I guess is somewhat after, you're not in intro, right? No. Which is somewhat an afternoon class, and then my design workshop class in the evening. I've told this too. So I'm going to offer the same thing to this Revit class, and we've got a few architecture students, we've got interior design students, so I think it's applicable. But my other two classes for next week, Monday and Wednesday, instead of having class in class, I want them to go to design week events. I don't care what night you go, but I wanted to give you time to go to design week events instead of having class. And so I think that at the pace that we're heading, if today goes well and Wednesday goes well, we will be kind of on schedule where we could go to design week events next week instead of attending class. And I know some of you are construction trades. How many are construction trade students? We've got a couple in here, right? 3, 4. Okay. And then we have architecture, and we have interior design, we have architecture, right? Okay. Well, let me pull up the design week stuff here. Okay. SL Design Week. Trent's heard this before, but I'm going to say my spiel again. And, not San Francisco Design Week. Oh, they've got a fancy website. SL Design Week. There we go. How did that happen again? All right. So design week only happens one time a year, and it always happens during fall semester. And I think it's extremely important, and that's why I give time in class to go to it for a week, because I firmly believe that, number one, I want you as students to get out there and to meet professionals, right, in the design community. And I think that actually really does translate to construction trade students, because contractors will be there, right? And so will architects and interior designers and graphic designers and a bunch of people from visualization, right? People that will hire you for your technology skills and your design skills. So I think it's important that you go out and interact with professionals who will be at these events. And I also think it's important that you get involved in the design community, right? Because you're going to be working with design professionals essentially for the rest of your career, right? Whatever form that's in, you're going to be working with some type of design professional. And so I preach about this a lot, but it's because I really, really think it's really important, because these are people who are going to be giving you jobs and people who are going to be helping you, review your portfolios for getting into school and a lot of other important things. So, so Design Week is October 1st through the 5th, and the Architecture Club is going to be going to events on Wednesday for sure, and then I think I'm going to go to another one on Tuesday. I think I'm going to try and make it to this one, the Karen Cahoon talk. But essentially there's just really kind of a huge, there's just a huge variety of events you can go to. You can go to studio tours, right? So I'll pick the one we're going to actually go to. So on Wednesday, the Architecture Club is going to be touring. I don't think we'll make it to Nexus, but we're going to be going to Upwall Design, and we're going to be going to Method Studio. So we're going to try and get it to Upwall right at 4:30 when the studio tour starts. And so we'll go to that one first, and then we'll make our way over to Method Studio. And both of these places have rather new studios, right? Upwall is in Sugar House, and they do a lot of, I'm just going to call it mountain architecture for lack of a better term, but it's like nice mountain architecture, right? Giant homes. Somebody who worked there recently told me that on the last project she worked on, their budget was $700 a square foot. For those of you, that's like triple maybe what a typical budget is for like a nice house. You know what I mean? So they do really kind of upscale mountain type architecture, right? But they have kind of a really kind of hip and fun young type of studio. So I think it'll be good to go there and kind of see what they're up to. And then Method Studio, they do a lot of different type of stuff. That's where my husband works at Method Studio, and they do gigantic commercial projects. They do housing. They do stuff on college campuses all over the place. They just have a huge portfolio of work that they do, right? And they have a brand new studio, and it's downtown Salt Lake. Or South Salt Lake maybe. They're on about 10th South and 3rd West by the Tesla, right there by the Tesla service place by Target. So it's not South Salt Lake yet. Okay, so we'll call it Salt Lake City, even better. So they're in Salt Lake City. So we'll be going to those two for sure with the club. And then I will be going to, like I said, I think I'm going to try and go to the Karen Cahoon because I've never met her. And so that's on Tuesday from 6 to 8. This one looks kind of interesting though too, so I might have to decide beer and design. Catchy title, right? I guess not right now, but I won't be drinking for a few months, unfortunately. What's that? Oh, yeah. I know. It's sad. It's good. Why can't I click on it? See, it doesn't even want me to click on it to know about it. We looked at it earlier today, and it's basically like they're going to be talking about breweries, I think, here, if I remember what it was about. And it's at Salt Lake Uinta Brewing Company. Anyway, interesting stuff. And then there was another one I was thinking about going to. Oh, I'm still debating Fashion Remix. So Fashion Remix is this woman, her name's Kat. She used to work at Method Studio. But they won a couple years ago. And like her vest, if you look at it, no, there it goes. It did want me to look at it. Let's see. What it takes to design craft beer brands and explore the unique challenges of building a beer garden for Lagoon Theme Park. What could be better, right? So that one kind of sounded fun. But these are usually, if they're not free, they're rather inexpensive. This one is the kind of the odd duck in that. Fashion Remix. For students, it's $30. For professionals, it's $55. So I'm on the fence about the price, honestly. But that woman who was on the cover, like she, it's essentially they assign you a design concept, like, and in this case, they're doing architects. So the teams were assigned an architect. Like the college's team was assigned Gaudi. And then they were given a product manufacturer to create a piece of fashion with. So the one at the college, we were given some vinyl flooring company, right? So they have to design a piece of fashion, keeping in mind the architect and then using the product on the actual fashion. So it's always really great. But that one's kind of expensive, you know. So this woman here, they had floor tile, I believe. So they cut all these little pieces of floor tile to create her vest. And then her skirt was like an underlayment type stuff for tile that they made into this billowing gown. It's really beautiful. But what I hear is there's some really other interesting designs this year. So instead of having class next week, I am giving my students time to go to 2 Design Week events. So Monday, whenever. I don't care when it is, but that time, I will just give you that time. So if you want to go like Tuesday night, you can go Tuesday night, but I'll give you those 2 classes to go to Design Week events. So I think it's that important that you all hobnob with, you know. My husband and I went to every event we could as students. Like, you know, I think sometimes people were like, what are you 2 doing here? But we would go to every event we could, and I think it made it so that we know a lot of people. We have a huge network of people that they may not sometimes know who we are, but when they see our faces, they're like, oh yeah, we've, you know, seen you at all those events and you were always there. And so it pays off. So what I'll do is I will post 2 assignments for Design Week, and essentially you just have to show a piece of information showing you were there. So if it's a ticket, right, scan the ticket or take a photo and post it. If it's a flyer from the event, like studios will give out flyers, right, show a picture of the flyer, and then take a selfie of yourself identifying something in the background. And I just want you to tell me if you liked the event, if you disliked it, right? Just a paragraph. I liked it because the studio was great. I love the remodeled studio. I love the architecture that these people create. Or I didn't like it because it was really stuffy and the stuff they did was overpriced and terrible, right? So I just want to have your thoughts on what you thought. So any questions on that? Okay, good. So hopefully you'll see a lot of other students there because I have 3 classes going. And I don't think Kevin's classes are more during the day. And the design events are more at night, so it affects my classes more, but he's going to give extra credit, I think, for people going to his. Anyway, should be fun. So 2 Design Week events next week, and I think if we can get through our coursework tonight, then I think we'll be pretty good schedule-wise. All right. So I'm going to follow our course manual rather closely with this lecture because we really went through kind of some of these beginning things last time when we talked about walls and drew these walls here. So I'm going to skip down just a little bit. Well, I'll go over this briefly. But what I really want to follow very closely is the fact that I'm going to be showing you how to define walls. And I want you to know that in the course manual, I very clearly and very wordily, that's a word, outline how to create a wall definition. Okay, so step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. Okay, so if you sort of get lost, you can just follow the steps to work your way through it. And then a little bit further down here, I have created some wall definitions that I want to follow. So, hey, we're going to create a new wall. We're going to start here. We're going to go here. We're going to go here, right? I very clearly, with words and graphics, kind of shown you how to move through this because it's an important step in what we're doing here, okay? All right. And let me say this, for your assignment, you're going to be drawing more walls, if you guys hadn't guessed. Let's see, let's come all the way up here. But let me start with grids. And I want to start with grids because our grids are really going to, they're going to help guide you. And I wanted to use reference planes last time so that you saw what reference planes were capable of, right? We can draw these construction lines, these reference planes, and we can use them to help us draw things. That's great, right? I am going to file, save as, and I'm going to make a copy of this one. Okay. And I'm just going to delete all of these reference planes, right? I'm going to select them all in floor plan view, delete. Select them all in floor plan view, delete. Okay. And I guess I have to actually probably open up the imbue cabin set as well. So we'll open up this here to take a look at it. And what I'm going to put in its place are some architectural grids here. And I say architectural because I'm setting them. The engineer isn't setting them. Otherwise, you know, you can say the term, hey, we're setting a structural grid, right? But for the purposes of an architectural set, it's an architectural grid, right? Even though sometimes you'll hear the term structural grid. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create some grid lines, okay? And I'm going to hide these. So it appears as if there's nothing in my floor plan view, all right? And the grids are really easy to use. They, you draw them, in fact, just like you would a reference plane, and you'll use kind of the line type action to do that. If you go to the architecture tab and you go all the way down here to the end, there's a little grid button under datum. So I'm going to click on grid, and you'll notice we get a line, an arc, another arc, and then a pick to create these. And I'm going to just use a line to draw them, and I'm going to start with number 1. And I'm just going to kind of draw this in space because I don't really know where number 1 is yet, right? But I need to get a grid on my page. So I'm going to click, click, and there's my first grid line, right? And I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to click on that grid line, and I'm going to zoom into the marker on it, the tag. And I'm going to see that just like our levels, right, I can check that and uncheck it, and the bobblehead turns on and off. I can click on this little elbow, and it elbows. I can drag the elbow back into alignment, right? I can grab this, click and hold, and drag this out, right, so it moves. And then I can come back up here, and I can turn this one on if I'd like, right? So I can kind of modify these very easily. I'm going to drag this in just a little bit. So instead of using reference planes to draw, I'm going to put in a grid system, right? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8. I have 8 grids here going, you know, kind of the vertical grids going this direction. So I need to create another grid line. So I can go to Architecture tab, go down to Grid, okay? And I can use my line tool again, or I can use a pick, okay? And I'm going to see, look at my plans and see that grid line 2 is 6 feet away from grid line 1. So if I use a line tool, I can kind of touch that and see that I get 6 foot there, right? I can also come up and use a pick tool, right? This is just like drawing a wall. And I can give an offset of 6 foot, enter, hover, click, and I get a second grid line. That's pretty easy, right? There's my number 2, so it starts sequentially numbering them. Well, grid line 3 is 9 foot off, so I'm just going to change my 9 foot, enter, click, okay. And number 4 is 4 foot off, so I change my offset to 4, enter, click, and there's my number 4. And I have number 5, which is 10 foot 6, so 10 space 6, enter. Right, so I click and I have 10 foot 6. And I just continue along here getting all of my vertical grids. 5, number 6 is 4 foot 6. 4 foot 6. There we go. My last 7 is 8 foot 6. Oop, there we go. My last one is 4 foot. 4 foot, enter. Oop. Okay. None of these have the little tags at the end, so I'm just going to click on them. I'm going to hit escape, click on it, turn on the little marker, escape, click, turn on the marker, escape, click, turn on the marker. I'm going to do it with all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I totally did. What happened? Did I delete? Or I just didn't, maybe I didn't add it. Oh, look, it's 9 at the bottom and 8 at the top. Well, that's kind of odd. I'm going to delete. They were in the same spot. That's what it was. So I'd accidentally drawn one right over the top of the other. Let's do 5, 6. I'm going to change the number of this. So this is a good example, right? I'm going to change this one to 7, and I'm going to create a new number 8. The heads of these markers are very easily modified. So it's almost like we have levels that go vertically. These are horizontal levels, essentially. So I'm going to click again. I'm going to change that to 7, enter. Oh, 7 is somewhere in there already. Delete. Well, that's weird. Grid, pick line. Number 7 is 8 foot 6. Oop. All right, where's our number 7? I think I'm gonna have to undo. That's kind of a weird, really weird thing that I don't remember happening ever. I'm just hitting undo. I went one too far, so I'm gonna click on redo. There's our number 7. Okay. Number 8 is 4 foot. Let's see, grids. Number 8 is 4 foot off of that last one, so 4 foot. There we go. Okay, all worked out. I don't know what I did, but I did something. And Revit didn't really like it, so. Okay, so I have all my grids, and now it's time for me to do my horizontal grids, right? So we'll start with, this time we want A, B, C, D instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. And Revit doesn't really care if it's a number or a letter, right? So you can do whatever you want with that. So I'm going to click on level or grids again. Let's see if it has a shortcut. Yep, grid, GR. And I'm going to click my first horizontal. Now Revit automatically wants to do numbers because you've been creating numeric grids. But if I just come over here and I type in click, click, A, enter, there we go, right? And now B is 4 feet off of that, so I'm just going to do exactly what I did before with the vertical grids, but I'm just going to make them go horizontal. Okay, so grid, GR, and I click on my pick. My offset is 12 foot 9, 12 space 9. Oh no, sorry, 4 foot to B. I was getting ahead of myself there, wasn't I? I'm going to change that to 4 foot, enter, pick. And now Revit gets smart and thinks, okay, we're doing letters now. So B and C will be 12 foot 9. C and then D will be 6 foot 3. 6 foot 3. There we go. E will be 19 feet. There we go. And so now I have my gridded system on here, which is great because that's the structural grid indicated on the drawings. What I like about this a little bit better than using reference planes is that it's a little bit easier to reference, right? I have A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so that makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of be able to indicate where things are going to be happening in my drawings, okay? Now, again, this is one of those things where this might be one of my rule-breaking instances where, remember I said I don't pin stuff down a lot, right? I think maybe one of the things that I probably do, there's probably 2 things in Revit that I now will pin down for sure, right? Instead, when I was learning, I pinned everything down and it turned into a gigantic mess. But I will pin down a structural grid, okay? So I'm going to select them all at the same time, and I'm going to click on pin. And it pins all those down. And I will pin down AutoCAD files that I bring into Revit, right, so they don't move. And so I will definitely pin those 2 things down. So my structural grid's pinned, and now I think it makes it a little bit visually easier for me to draw this, right? I would probably use reference planes if maybe the structural grid wasn't quite complete, or it wasn't that well defined, or they hadn't defined it at all. I would probably just throw down the reference lines and use those to help me draw. Okay. I think maybe my final step in this, we only know how to use one type of dimension, but I would probably dimension this grid just so that I could visually see that it was correct. So I'm going to first bring these down just a tiny bit. Oop. I'm clicking that little modify, click and hold. Ooh, bless you. Oh, it's pinned. It won't even let me. You see? See? I'm telling you, man, I have to unpin it now. But they all kind of very nicely drag down, right? So that was just my weirdness, wanting to make them a little bit tighter in there. There we go. Okay. So I grab them all again, and I pin them back down. There we go. All right, so I have my structural grid now, and I think these will help you, just like the reference planes helped you, they'll help you create your geometry. And you guys aren't going to like it, but you're going to redraw your first level walls again this week. So that's going to be part of your assignment. So what I'd like you to do for this week's assignment is, instead of putting reference planes down to help you draw, throw down some grids and use those to help you draw, okay? And like I said, I'm going to draw a quick dimension. We learned that was DI, dimension. We only know how to do one type of dimension, click, click, but I'm just going to quickly create those, click, click, and it creates the whole string until I click in nowhere land, click, done. So nice and easy and scaled, and we don't have to set anything up if we don't want to. Click, 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 and you just can't even handle it, can you?
You change one and then match property.
Yeah,
So you don't have to redraw it?
Oh, you mean, what do you mean? Sorry.
The old drawing, take a grid line,
Oh.
One of those grid lines to or plane line and change the
Oh.
grid line in the match property.
I don't think that'll work because they're two. You have to match properties to identical objects.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it'll change one to the other. Yeah, you're just he's too excited about the dimensions after AutoCAD. All right. All right, so we have kind of our system set up, and that will allow us to create our walls, right? So we know how to create walls, but how are those walls defined, right? That's going to be kind of the major topic today, is defining walls. And it's kind of an important topic because the process we're going to follow to define walls will be the same process that we follow to create floor systems and roof systems and new components or slash, we call them families in Revit, but blocks. And to create any, quote, new type of item, we're going to follow the exact same process that we're going to learn today to create brand new walls, okay? So I want to say that. I also want to say that this, it's kind of a technical type operation. Not in that I can't teach you how to do it, but you sort of, when you're creating wall assemblies, you sort of need to have some knowledge as to what a wall assembly looks like, right? So this is where kind of beginning designers who have no experience in the field, they know how to create the walls. They get that, right? But you're like, well, I don't know, maybe how big a block of CMU is. I don't know the width or depth or height of a block wall, right? I don't know all the different sizes of metal studs. I don't know where the vapor barrier goes on a wall. I don't know, what the air gap behind masonry is. And these are things you build into the wall assembly. So I just want to say up front, just know or learn how to create the wall assembly, and the knowledge behind the pieces of it will come later, essentially, right? So don't get panicked when I'm like, create this wall type. Usually I at first really well define it so you can just follow the steps, right? But if somebody were to say, hey, create a gypsum board wall, don't get too hung up on the fact you're like, I don't know. What do you do when you create a gypsum board wall out of? I don't know, right? Is there insulation? Is there a stud? I mean, don't get too caught up on that definition. I want you mainly just to understand that walls are defined in Revit and how to do that, okay? So we're going to talk about that. Okay. All right. We've talked about a lot of this stuff. We talked about a lot of this stuff last time we met, but I just want you to realize that number one, when we're generating walls in Revit, in the architectural model, you're creating architectural walls, okay? We're drawing walls to show design intent in an architectural model, which is different than creating structural walls, okay? So structural walls, let me just come over here to the wall command. I'm saying this because you may not have noticed this before, but we have an architectural wall type here, and we have a structural wall type here. Okay. Architectural walls show design intent. This is where the designer wants the walls to be, right? So when we create an architectural wall, anybody who gets into our model, they knew it was drawn by a designer, by the contractor, okay? As opposed to a structural wall, which is going to be owned by the structural engineer, okay? And I say that because different people are responsible for different things in Revit models, right? The architect is really responsible for design intent, right? And the structural engineer is responsible for the building staying upright, right? All of the structure. And so if you click on a wall and it's defined as a, quote, architectural wall, you know who drew it and who is responsible for it. And if you click on a wall and it's showing that it's defined as a structural wall, you know who drew it and who is responsible for it, essentially, okay? This is the same idea as when we draw layers in AutoCAD, right? When we name our layers like A-wall, we name it A-wall because we want other people to know who drew it and who's responsible for it. Okay, same type of deal. So in an architectural model, we draw architectural walls. Okay, so that's one thing I want to point out. Walls are defined elements in Revit, which we'll talk about in a second. So they have defined assemblies associated with them. We can change them. We can create new assembly types, which is great. But the best thing about having walls that are defined is that they're measurable. So we can take a wall that is 20 feet tall, 50 foot long, and composed of gypsum board, a wood stud, and gypsum board on the other side. And we can calculate how much of every material is needed for that wall, right? When you define it like that, you can say, well, what is the area needed for the gypsum board? Oh, it's 500 square feet, whatever it ends up being, right? So these elements have these defined assemblies so that we can use the information in those assemblies to find out other things, right? Area takeoffs, the volume of the wall. Mechanical engineers use it for, heat transfer through walls. Consultants, envelope consultants use it for energy transfer through the walls. Lots of stuff, essentially, right? So the idea that we build this information into the wall assembly allows other people to use it. We talked about this last time. Walls have defined tops and bottoms. We know that. And they're defined by levels. And walls can be drawn in several views. So we can draw them in plan view, 3D perspective, section, or detail. But probably the easiest view to draw them in is floor plan view. One final thing I want to point out, and we'll get to why this is helpful in a few weeks, but I want to point out that walls are room bounding elements. Okay, so what that means is that 3D volumetric rooms are defined by walls, wall bounding or room bounding elements. Okay, we'll talk about why that's important. All right, so I'm just going to draw a quick wall here. I'm going to pick this first wall here, and I'm just going to draw it. And what does it have? Oh, all right. Well, hold on a second. Revit is still recognizing these walls, so I'm going to delete them. Okay. All right. Wall, WA. And I'm just going to draw a wall to show you a few things. Okay. So here's my wall. And when I click on it, right, well, first thing, when I draw a wall and I don't define the top and bottom constraint, and I think Revit is remembering this from when we were drawing last time, right, but usually it will define the base constraint as the level you're on, and then it will define the upper constraint as 20 feet tall, okay, unless you define it as a different height. I had just been drawing these walls defined a level 2 in our previous session, so Revit kind of remembered that. Okay, I'm going to pop into a 3D view, and I'm going to remember that this wall is a 3D element, right? If I select it and I rotate around it, I can see that it has a length and it has a width and it has a height, right? I can also see that it's defined to have CMU block, wainscot, to have brick with some reveals, and it looks like it has a little cap at the top, right? Parapet cap at the top. Okay, so walls are 3D elements. If I pick this wall, if I select it and it turns blue, okay, I can look over here in my properties dialog box and I can see what kind of wall this is. So this says, hey, this is an exterior brick and CMU wall on metal stud. Great, okay. But what does that mean, right? Well, while I have my wall selected, if I click on Edit Type here, click, I come into this Type Properties dialog box. And there's a lot of things down here that we're not going to really worry about, but you can input a lot of information into this wall. See, heat transfer coefficient, thermal resistance, thermal mass, absorbance. That must be acoustic. I don't even know, right? Roughness, whatever that means. Structural material, but there's a lot of things in here we're really not going to worry about right now, except for where I see structure. Okay, if I click on Edit there as well, I'm brought into the wall assembly dialog box. Okay. One thing you're going to have to start getting used to in Revit is the fact that there are just dozens of dialog boxes everywhere in Revit, and they're not always readily revealed like this one. You have to select something, you have to hit Edit, and then you have to hit Structure, right? It's not just like, show me the structure of your wall. Well, it's going to take 3 buttons to get there, right? So I look in my my edit assembly dialog box and I can make it bigger. Okay, and there's a few things I notice. Let me see if I, oh, I'm just zooming, using my Windows Zoom to zoom in here just a little bit. But I can see what this wall is now made of. I can see that there is brick on the outside. I can see that there is CMU. I can see there's a thermal air layer. I can see there's a membrane layer. There's a substrate, plywood layer. Then I have this core boundary separation, right? These two gray lines, they sort of separate out what the actual structure of the wall is, okay? So in this case, our structure is not the CMU block or the brick, but it's a metal stud layer. And then I see on the other side of the wall that I have a membrane layer and a gypsum wallboard layer, right? It's daunting. It's very daunting. So all of these wall pieces, this assembly, this is what makes up this wall assembly, okay? And I can tell a lot of things about it, like I said, right? We can look at this and say, well, how much brick is in this project? Well, if all these walls are, you know, they go from level 1 to level 2 and it's 50 foot long, we can tell the area of that. So you can schedule these things and you can figure out cost estimates pretty accurately, right?
You do like wainscoting, like halfway up and all that kind of.
Yep. When we get a little bit more advanced, right, you can split the wall up and assign different materials. Yeah, we're not going to get that fancy just yet. But this is what the wall assembly looks like. So when I say walls are defined, this is what I mean, right? We show the finishes, we show the thermal air layers, we show the substrate, we show the structure, and then other finished layers on the inside, okay? So I'm going to hit cancel here and just get out of this for now. Okay, and I'm back in Revit now. All right, so how do we then, oh, sorry, we've talked about defining walls. I have talked about top and bottom constraints, but let me just talk about that one more time. I'm going to go to an elevation. This is a north elevation here, where I can see that little wall there. Look how lovely it is, right? I'm going to change I'll call out settings as I change them because there's just so many. I don't want you to forget about them. But I'm going to change the coarseness level of my view. So down here at the bottom, these tiny little buttons. I'm going to change my coarseness level to fine. Okay. This actually didn't change it a whole lot. I thought it might give us a few more layers, but it didn't. All right, so when I look at this wall, I'm going to click on it again. And I'm going to come over here and see that the base constraint of my wall is level 1. Level 1. There's my base constraint. And then my top constraint is level 2. Goes up to level 2. If I change that, so if I wanted to go from level 4 down here, I can do that, right? And if I want it to go up to level 1, I can do that. If I change level 4 to go negative 15 foot, right, the wall follows it because it's been defined to follow it. Okay, I'm going to hit undo and undo that. I'm going to click on my wall again. I'm going to change my base constraint. Well, actually, I'm going to change my top constraint first up to level 3. And I'll change my base constraint now to level 1. So it's kind of back where it needs to be, right? But again, if I change any of the heights on these datums, these levels, then the wall flexes to go along with it, okay? All right. So let's see. We talked about that. And we've talked about how to draw walls. I've outlined this pretty well, but honestly, I think we went over how to draw walls, and you've already had an assignment, so I think we're kind of past that. What I really want to talk about now is how to define walls. Okay, so I'm going to move down to that a little bit more. Altering wall types. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to alter a wall type, and then I'm going to show you how to change wall types from element to element. Okay, so that's kind of where I want to get to today, how to redefine walls. And then when we meet on Wednesday, I'll review it. And then I'd like to talk about doors and hopefully doors. We might get to windows next time, but I think if we can get to doors, we'll still be on track to do Design Week. Okay, So let's talk about creating a new wall type. All right, I'm going to go back to my level 1 floor plan view, and I'm going to delete this wall, and I'm going to pick another wall. Okay, so I'm going to click on the wall command, and we'll change this to, let's do ephes on metal stud. I'm going to draw another little piece of wall segment here. There we go. And I'm going to change the coarseness of my view. So my little coarseness marker here, or toolbar, click, change this to fine. Okay, that's what I was hoping would happen with my elevation, but it didn't. So what I just did there, right, I changed the coarseness level, and it took it from a fundamental outline block, right, to a well-defined layered wall system. So here, I can see all the different layers of my wall assembly. If I click on shaded view here, I can see them in color, right, which is kind of nice to be able to differentiate them. All right, now let's look at the actual wall assembly of this. So to view the wall assembly, I'm going to click on my wall. I'm going to come over here and click on Edit Type, and my Type Properties dialog box pops up. We're not quite there yet. I'm going to hit Edit, and these are all the different layers in my wall. So I have a finish, which is the ephes, exterior insulating finishing system. That's this layer. I have the membrane layer, which is air infiltration barrier. Oh wait, no, sorry, thermal layer, which is air. There's 2 inches of air there. Then I have a membrane layer, which is a 0 width, right? Like maybe a vapor barrier or something like that. Maybe like a lath or something happening there. Then I have a substrate plywood, which is right there, 3/4 of an inch thick. And then I have a structural element, which is a metal stud layer, which is 6 inches, which is this. And then I have another membrane layer, the vapor barrier there, 0 width. And then I have a gypsum board wall, 1/2 inch on the inside, right? So all of these different layers of the wall assembly are illustrated here in floor plan view, all right? Now, let me show you how to navigate this dialog box, okay? If I hover over this number 4 with this little black arrow, right? Or sorry, it changes to a little black arrow. If I hover right over number 4, see that happens? And if I click while it's a little black arrow, I select that layer. I can choose to change the function, change the material, change the thickness. I can move it up or down or delete it, okay? Same thing here. Click, 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 right? So I can highlight all of those different things. I'm going to come back up here to my, sorry, I'm going to make this a little longer there. There we go. I'm going to come up to my finish, which is the ephes. Let's say I wanted to make this 5 inches thick. I would click in the thickness, 0 space 5, enter. And I'm going to hit, oh, it didn't do, there, nope, okay, apply. And you see how the thickness of that wall assembly increased, okay? Edit again, change it to 6, okay? Apply, there it is, okay? Edit. So you guys get the idea. I can change the thickness of any of those items, right? Which is where, again, where the beginning design students really struggle because they don't know any of this. They're like, oh, I need a metal stud. Oh, let's try 3 inches, right? Well, that maybe actually is the size of a metal stud, right, sometimes. But don't get too hung up on that, okay? All right, so let's look at some of these layers and what they mean and how we can assign them. Every row in your wall assembly, which corresponds to a material in your wall, has a function, all right? So we have function number 1 and 2, sorry, finish number 1 and 2, which are going to be 4 is the exterior side and 5 is going to be the interior side. Exterior side, see that? Interior side. So when you're building your wall assemblies, you're going to want to make sure that you pay attention to the interior/exterior side. So we have a function. Finishes are going to be finishes, tile or gypsum board, or exterior finishes like siding or ephes or something to that effect, okay? So we also have a material, all right? And this is, when I first started learning this, I was like, well, okay, it's a material. What does that mean? How do I make ephes, right? Or how do I make wood in Revit? And really, it's just text, essentially, right? This says ephes, and it has this hatch associated with it, that means ephes. I don't really have to tell it anything else other than this is called ephes. It's 6 inches thick and it appears right here in the wall assembly. Like, that's really all there is to it. So I'm going to click on my material and I get a little ellipsis browser right there, and a material browser pops up. Okay, so when I want to change or define a material in here, why do I have little oh, okay. I would come in here and I would type in the search box something like wood. Oh, look, we have all these different types of wood. We'll do, we don't want any of those. Let's do concrete. Concrete masonry unit, right? And I can see over here the pattern that's going to show on that when I look at it in 3D. And this is really all you do to define a material in Revit. I hit OK, and that just changed from ephes to concrete masonry unit. Okay. And then I have a thickness. We're going to worry about these first 3 areas: the function, the material, and the thickness. Now, you're probably thinking, well, the concrete masonry unit is maybe more of a structural item. Why is it finish, right? Well, in this case, it's not. It's just for aesthetics, right? They want the exterior of the wall to look like ephes. So that's not what's really holding up the wall. It's really the metal stud layer, right? That's the structure. And so in this case, the CMU block is a finish, and that's okay. All right, so finish number 4 is on the exterior side. Finish number 5 is going to be on the interior side. Okay. We have structure number 1. So structure goes in between these 2 core boundaries. That's one thing you want to remember. There always has to be something in between these 2 core boundaries, and it's always going to generally be structure. Okay, so structure is number 1. Substrate is number 2. Okay. And then we have a membrane layer, which is number 3. And then, that was membrane, right? Sorry, membrane right there. Sorry, and thermal air is 3, not membrane. But those are all the different functions: the finishes, the thermal air layer, the membrane, the substrate, and the structure. Okay. Now you're going to notice that I have a membrane layer on the exterior side, but I also have one on the interior side, and that's just fine. Okay. You can assign functions on both sides of the walls, right? And you can use the functions more than once. So if I wanted to have, you know, finish number 1, which is 4, right? Concrete masonry, but I also wanted to add brick, I could add another finish number 1, 4, and add brick. Okay. The only thing that Revit sort of pays attention to in this series is that things are in the right spot. Okay. Which means that we have structure, and then, for example, we have like our substrate likely touching our structure most of the time. So the plywood goes in on the outside of the metal stud, right? The plywood doesn't normally, if I move it up, go on the outside of the masonry. So if I try and hit OK, it'll say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't work out. You can't do that, okay? So you're going to try and keep these somewhat in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 1, and there's no 2 or 3, so it's just 5 or 4, right? There's no 2, 3, or 4, so we have 5. So it starts at 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you mix those up, you'll get an error. Same thing down here, all right? So this is a really long explanation, and I only have to do it usually once, and then everybody somewhat gets it, but there's a lot of talking. Okay, so we have all of these different sort of rows, which indicate wall assembly elements, right? What if you want to add something? What if I wanted to add another layer of gypsum board down here, right? How do I add things to this? Well, I'm going to click on the layer where I want to add another finish, and I'm going to hit insert, and it inserts something above where I had my cursor. Okay, but you know, I can also once I create it, move it down, up, down, down. And you notice structure, you know, we don't want it structure because structure always is in between these 2 boundaries. So I'm going to change the finish to finish number 2 again. We'll make this gypsum board by clicking on the ellipsis. Gypsum board. Okay. 1/2 inch thick. And there's my wall assembly, right? So I can add things in, and I can also delete things. Maybe I don't want an air layer. So I click on it and I hit delete and it goes away. If I wanted to add it back in, I could choose insert. We'll make this a thermal air layer again. There is actually an air material in here, right? And we'll make the thickness 2 inches. There we go. Okay, so I can add things. I can also delete things. I can move things up and down the assembly. The general rules are, number one, you always need a structural element, number one, between the core boundary designations, and then your layers have to ascend or descend in numeric order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, ascending up to exterior, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, descending down to the interior side. Now if I hit OK, and I hit OK again, you saw my wall assembly flex a little bit and change, right? And I've just edited that wall type, all right? Now if I click on this wall again, right, and I hit edit type, and I hit edit again, all of those things are still the same, okay? Any questions so far? Not yet, right? All right. So that's how we're going to edit a wall assembly. So when somebody says, hey, I want you to create a gypsum board wall, you're going to go in and you're going to edit the wall assembly to whatever that looks like for you, okay? All right, now for my big spiel, this big notes about Revit spiel that is important because this is how everything else in Revit functions, okay? The first thing I want to kind of clarify is that Revit has a bunch of wall types already defined for you, right? So when I click on wall and I go to my properties dialog box here, I can use the drop down and I can pick several different wall types that I want to draw with, right? So if I want to draw a generic 12-inch wall, I'll pick that. If I want to draw with a retaining wall, I'll pick that, right? Whatever I want to draw with, I come over here, I click on it, I pick it, and I use it to draw, okay? Now, those walls, I mean, there are several of them, but there isn't every single wall type that you need, right? Meaning that through the process of a project, you're going to have to create a new wall type, right? So we need to know how to be able to do that. Now, this is, again, I've said it 5 times, but hopefully it will sink in. This is something you're going to do with a lot of different types of things in Revit. So walls, doors, windows, floors, ceilings, roofing systems, components, families, right? You're going to follow the exact same process I show you next to create new items in Revit, right? So if there's a wall type that I can't find and that I need to define, I need to create a new wall type, right? Makes sense. But Revit doesn't function in a way that allows you to click a, quote, new wall button and just redefine it fresh, right? There's no new wall button up here anywhere. So you can't say, I want to define a new wall. Click new wall and then define everything, okay? The way that Revit actually works is that it wants you to take an item that is most closely defined to the object you want to create. Then it wants you to duplicate that object, rename it, redefine it, and then use it, all right? And you're probably thinking, well, that's kind of stupid, right? Why would I just take something that is there and redefine it when probably creating something fresh is just as easy, right? And at first I thought the same thing, and then I thought, you know what? It's actually quite a bit of work to define all these things, right? And there's a lot of levels there. And as this assembly is right now, it's functioning. Everything is defined the way it should, and it's in the right place, and it works, right? So after a while, I kind of thought about it, and I think it actually doesn't make a lot of sense because there's so much definition in all of these elements in Revit that it does make sense to find something very similar to the object you want to create and then change it, right? Instead of from the beginning just create something new, okay? All right, so how do we create a new wall type? I want to take this wall type that was EFIS and I changed to block, right? And well, no, I don't want to take that one. Let me create a new one. Let's see, wall type. I'm going to click on wall type. I'm going to take, let's see, this interior 5-inch partition, and I'm going to alter it. Okay, so I'm going to click on interior partition. I'm just going to draw it so you can see it, right? So the way that this wall is currently drawn, let's look at its assembly. I'm going to hit edit type, edit, and I see that it has 5/8" gypsum board, 2 layers on one side, a 2.5" metal stud, and then 2 layers of 5/8" gyp board on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. I just wanted to look at it, all right? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a new wall type, and I want it to have a 2x6 wood stud wall with 1 layer of gypsum board on either side, all right? So just from what I've told you, my task would be to find a wall type that's similar to the one I want to create, right? I'm going to duplicate it, rename it, redefine it, and then use it, which just it's complicated, but once you get into the habit, it's going to be pretty easy, okay? So I'm going to grab this wall type, and the thing that I'm going to tell you next is pretty key. Right now it's called interior 5-inch partition. If I hit edit type and I hit edit structure and I start redefining things here, it's going to edit that wall with this name, right? So if I ever wanted to go back and use that original wall, it would sort of be redefined. It wouldn't be kind of that perfect wall that was defined one way in Revit. Okay, so I don't want to take existing things and redefine them. I want to take existing things, copy them, rename them, and redefine them, right? So they have a new name, it leaves the original alone, and I get a redefinition. Make sense, somewhat? Everybody's looking around like, yep. Sounds about right, sounds about right. We'll go over it again, trust me. This will be pretty easy for you guys pretty soon. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the process twice just so you can watch. Okay, so I picked a wall that is most similar to the new wall type I want to generate. I'm going to click on it. First thing I need to do, select it. Second thing, duplicate. So I'm going to hit edit type. See my duplicate button here? Duplicate. And it says, hey, that's great. You want to duplicate it. What do you want to name it? So I'm going to call this 2x6 wood stud with gypsum both sides. Okay, give it a new name, right? Your office is really probably going to dictate how you start naming things, right? It's kind of like layer naming. You guys sort of get a system in place and you use it. What I just did there, duplicating and renaming, I now have a brand new wall type. That is creating a new wall type. Now I want to edit it, and I want to change all those things I just said. So instead of having 2 layers of gypsum board, I only want 1. So click, delete. Click down here, delete. Well, I don't want a metal stud, I want a wood stud. So I'm going to click here. Now, you know, like Douglas fir is a softwood lumber, right? So it's a little tricky. It doesn't just say like stud wall, it says softwood lumber. So that's what you're going to pick. Hit OK. Give it a new thickness. So a 2x6 wood stud wall, 5.5 inches. OK. OK. And there's my new wall, right? With my new wall type name. Okay, not as difficult as I made it sound, hopefully, right? But the nice thing about this is now this is in my list of walls, but you see that original one right there, still there, right? So I didn't get rid of the old one, I just copied it and created a new wall type. Okay, so let me do that one more time. I want to create, let me type in wall, or sorry, initiate the wall command. I'm going to create, let's see, I'm going to redefine this generic 6-inch wall to be a 2x4 stud wall with wood on or gypsum board on both sides, right? So I'm going to find the wall that's most closely related to the wall I want to generate. And actually it might be a different one, but I'm just going to show you how to do it with a generic wall. Okay, so likely I probably would have picked like this one because it's very close to that, right? But I want to show you how to redefine a generic wall. So I'll pick the generic 6-inch wall. You don't even have to draw a section of the wall. I'm just going to do it so visually you can all see what's happening. Okay. I click on that wall. I'm going to hit edit, type. I'm going to choose edit, structure. And I can see that really it's just a structural element here, no material assigned, and it's 6 inches thick. Great. Well, what I'd like to do, sorry, I went a step too far, is I'd like to duplicate this wall. Duplicate. We'll give it a new name. 2x4 wood stud with gypsum both sides. Okay. So by doing that, I just created a brand new wall type. This wall, once I hit OK, is no longer going to be defined or named generic wall type. It's going to be 2x4 wood stud. I'm going to hit Edit. And now I'm going to define the layers. So my structure is no longer categoryless. I'm going to click there. I'm going to change this one to softwood lumber. Okay. 2x4 wood stud wall, 4.5 inches, or 3.5 inches. Great. All right, well now I need to add gypsum board on the interior and exterior. So I'm going to click on my structure, or I can also, actually probably core boundary is easier. I'm going to choose Insert. Okay. I don't want it to be a structural element. I want it to be a finish, which is gypsum board. And number 4, because it's on the exterior side. Exterior side. Category, I want this to be gypsum board. Okay. The thickness, 1/2 inch. I'm going to do the same thing down here. Insert. Oh, but it popped it in between my core boundary. I don't want that. So while it's highlighted, I'm going to move it down. And this will be finish number 5. Oh. Gypsum wall board again. Okay. 1/2 inch. Okay. And now by hitting OK, it takes that duplicated wall type with that new definition, creates a brand new wall type, which will no longer be named this. There we go. Okay. And again, the reason we duplicate it is because we don't really want to change the original, right? Because you may want to use it down the road for something else, right? Now, these wall types are available for me to use. So I click on Wall. And I drop down and I can see 2x4 wood stud with gypsum on both sides. Great, right? So now for your assignment, right, for this project, instead of using just a generic wall with no definition, right, you're going to be using an interior wall, okay? And that tells, tells us a lot. It tells us how much, how many linear feet of wood stud we need and how much area of gypsum board we need for the project, right? So there's a lot of information that's conveyed. SD shade. I didn't really do a whole lot. There we go. Okay. Okay, any questions on the definition of the wall types? Okay. All right, so yeah.
If you did close out of this project, would those walls still pop up for future projects?
So they will be specific to the project you create them in. Okay. Yes, unless you create them in a template, which we haven't been doing. Yeah. So usually when you work in an office, they create a file that has everything predefined in it. So when you open it, they're already there. And they can be used in any project file, but they are going to be project specific for a while. Yep, that's a good question. All right, so just a couple more things tonight, and we'll go back over this again, the first part of our lecture on Wednesday, and then we'll get into doors, okay? But what happens if I made a mistake on the wall definition? I want to go back and change it, right? I can definitely do that. So if I click on this wall type and I think, oh, I really need 2 layers of gypsum board on the one side, there's a fire rating, something like that, and I want to make the change to this wall type instead of creating a new one, okay, I can click on the wall type I want to edit, and I can choose Edit Type, and I can choose Edit Structure, and then I could just click on here and I could choose Insert, finish number 2. Gypsum wallboard here. Here we go. Okay. We'll do 5/8 because that's what that says. Okay, okay. And it added my second layer of gypsum board there, right? So we can take existing wall types and we're going to create new wall types out of them. So we'll duplicate them, rename them, and redefine them, right? And I can also take existing wall types that maybe need to be edited a little, and I can change elements within them, okay? Again, I think that the hardest part about this, number 1 for beginning design students, is they're like, well, I know I need gypsum, but how thick is that? I don't know, 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, right? So kind of guessing at the thickness is always kind of tricky. And then the other kind of tricky thing just in general for everyone is getting the layers of that assembly in the correct order, right? Because if something is not in the correct order, you'll get an error. This is wrong, row 6 error, and it's just a pain in the neck. You just want to scream sometimes, right? So just make sure they're ascending up towards the exterior 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, right? And it should be good. All right, so talked about editing wall types. There's a lot of definition here, so if you happen to forget something, it's in the book. It's also in the video, right? Creating, we've talked about this, just more, the layer functions, right? This just goes over how to insert, how to delete, how to move things, right? So there's a lot of graphics, how to assign a material. So that's good. Thicknesses, changing the thicknesses of these, right? How to do that. Okay. So let's talk about your assignment for this week. You're going to have 2 parts to your assignment. You're going to have a drawing portion and you're going to have a wall creating portion of this. And the assignment is in Canvas here, so let me pull that up real quick. It's assigned to module 4 here. So part 1, walls. Okay. So what we're going to do this time is I'm going to have you define a couple wall types, and I'm going to have you redraw the main level, all right? And then next time we meet, we're going to create another couple of wall types, and I'm going to show you how to reassign the walls you've already created to those new wall types, okay? But I think this is enough for tonight. I think it's plenty to ponder on, right? Plenty of Revit pondering. But part 1, you're not going to like it, but I want you to open up your Imbue cabin file and delete all the walls you already generated because I want you to redraw them again. And I want you to redraw them by putting a grid system down, right? And then using the wall types that you create to draw the walls, essentially, okay? So delete all of your walls that you previously drew. And the best way to do that is just while in a floor plan view, select everything, hit delete, okay? And then what I want you to do is complete the 2 assignments, one on page 66 of your course manual, the other on page 67 of your course manual, okay? And you'll submit those to be graded. So this one on page 66, you're going to create 2 new wall types. You're going to create an exterior wall type, and you're going to create an interior wall type, okay? So the first wall type, and again, these I go very extensively through the steps of how to do it. So if you can't figure, if you get tired of reading, and go to the video and just follow along, but use the materials from the assignment to do it, okay? But essentially, you're going to be creating from the EFIS wall type. You're going to duplicate it, rename it, okay? And then you're going to redefine it to look like this, right? So if you look in the book, you can see I want this finish, this material, this thickness, okay? So that's wall type 1. You'll have that exterior wall type. Then the second wall type you're going to generate is an interior wall type, a 3.5 inch wood stud with gypsum on both sides. So creating 2 new wall types. Okay, and then once you have those generated, I want you to use the exterior wall type to draw those exterior walls again with the grids, and I want you to use the interior wall type to redraw the interior walls. Okay. How does that sound?
With the grid lines.
With the grid lines, yes. So silent. I'm used to chatty groups in class, right? It's getting too late, huh? Okay. So here's what we'll do. I want you to, try and take a whack at doing this. Use the video, use the book to help you. The steps are very, very, I think, clear in the book, so you can hopefully just follow them. And then if you have a ton of trouble, we can draw this. We can start drawing this, or I can show you how to create these in the next class, right? And then we'll talk about doors and windows, I think, next time. How does that sound? Good?
So there's two different files.
No. You're going to open up your same file and delete the floor plan stuff out of it. Delete your reference planes and delete your walls. I know it is going to kill you to do all that. Everybody's like, no. Well, I mean, although I say this.
Okay, create the wall types and then draw them with those walls.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
I get it.
Okay, good. All right. Any other? And again, like I said, if it gets to be too much, we'll do it in class again one time, right? I like to spend at least a class and a half on walls so it's very clear. And then after that, it's like everybody just breezes through it. It's like, oh, create a floor, do it like a wall. Create a roof, do it like a wall, right? It's very simple after that. Trust me. All right, there you go.